So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the session, The Future of Food in Africa, powered by Mohamed VI Polytechnic University, UM6P. My name is Mustafa El-Boussini. I'm professor and program lead of biodiversity and plant sciences at the university. This university is young, officially inaugurated by His Majesty the King Mohammed VI in January 2017, focusing on the African continent. UM6P has attracted world-class professors and has state-of-the-art research and teaching facilities. The university has established excellent networks in Africa and the rest of the world. Along with its partners, we strongly believe that UM6P is well positioned to play a key role in transforming the food systems in Africa. Our session should be a continuation of the UN efforts and the discussion on food systems transformation. I'm referring here to the UN Food Systems Summit held in New York, September 2021. This summit identified 5 major action areas, including nourish all people, which led to action like the Food is Never Waste Coalition, healthy diet from sustainable food system for children and all coalition. The second action area, boost nature-based solution of production, saw different multi-stakeholder commitment, including the Agroecology Coalition. In his statement at this summit, the Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "We must build a world where healthy and nutritious food is available and affordable for everyone, everywhere." He also stated it is possible to feed a growing global population while also safeguarding our environment. It takes sustainable consumption and production methods and nature-based solutions. And this ends his statement. Since our session is talking about Africa, it would be nice to have our discussion around some benchmarking. And this would be in relation to the Malabo Declaration, made at the African Union Summit held in June 2014, where there was commitment to end hunger in Africa by 2025 through the following action: sustainable and reliable production and access to quality and affordable inputs, supply of appropriate knowledge, information, and skills to users, efficient and effective water management system, notably through irrigation, suitable, reliable, and affordable mechanization and energy supplies. Ladies and gentlemen, where are we from achieving these targets and objectives? We are only 2-3 years to the 2025 commitment, especially when it comes to food, nutritional security, and safety to feed the Africa fast-growing population. I'm personally looking forward discussing this very important topic on the future of food in Africa, along with esteemed panelists. And it's my pleasure to introduce them now. On my left, Dirk Aliven, CEO, Food Ventures. We have Orion Leffers, co-founder and group CEO, Red Sea Farms. And we have Philip Rambot, owner and CEO of Agro Polychem. And then we have Professor Joanne Warren, professor at McGill University, and she is affiliate to Mohamed VI Polytechnic University. So welcome, and thank you so much for being with us here at this session. So let me start with the first question. And the way I'm going to run it, it's really to all of you. Some of the general questions, I would like to have input from all of you. First one, referring to this Malabo Declaration Summit, June 2014. There was commitment to end hunger by 2025. what's happening? We are not there yet. I'd like to hear your comments from the perspective of governance, policy, planning, on natural resources, soil, water, and crops, from business and entrepreneurship perspective as well. Please, anybody can join. Let me start with Joanne.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure. What a great session. So let's just go back to what the Malibu Declaration said. And it said we want to end hunger in Africa by 2025. It's a really difficult situation. We're seeing unprecedented amounts of hunger. You look at certain countries, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan. We can look also at Kenya. So some of these countries that we're mentioning are looking at millions, tens of millions of people that are facing hunger, that they're having a shortage of food. Why? Sometimes it's a civil conflict, but more likely it is civil conflict and some governance issues coupled with climate change and water shortages. So when we don't have enough water or we have flooding, too much water, this has led to a situation where we can't produce enough food for the population. And in the Sahel and West Africa regions, there are 65 million people that are just meals away from having no food left. It's very, very serious. So this is where I think we are today. And from a governance and policies perspective, we can do short-term issues. We can do a shipment of food, or we can send $1 billion. But that only deals with our needs for today. That's not a long-term solution. I'd like to pass it to one of my colleagues here on the panel, because they may have other perspectives.
Yeah, Philip, please.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm not farming in Africa. I'm a farmer in Bulgaria. I've been there for 25 years. And I have seen the way we have evolved for the last 15 years, basically doubling and more our productivity. I also have a fertilizer factory producing 1.2 million tons, and so I do sell quite some fertilizers. The problem, let's go back to basics. A farmer needs to take care of his soil. But in order to do that, he has to be sure that 5 years, 10 years from now, he's still going to be there. What is really lacking, as it was lacking also in the Eastern European countries, is a very clear register of who is owner of what piece of land and where are the delimitations. So that is a first prior top job from the politicians to set in order their cadastre, their land bank, so that the farmers know where it is. It's a hell of a job, it can be done, and afterwards it's so easy because everybody goes on the computer and knows exactly, this is my piece, this is his piece, he rented it out to this person, and so on and so on. So start with that. Need to have a land register. Second, soil. You need to know which soil you are, on which soil you are working. We have the fortune in Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine before to work with Chernozem, the black soil. In Africa, most of the soils is not Chernozem. It has actually a lot of aluminium oxides and ferrum oxides, and that has an impact on quite some things which are going to happen afterwards. Because yes, the soil in Africa is fertile, but it's very fragile. And it's not because you're sitting in the jungle that your soil is fertile, because you take the jungle away and all of a sudden with this enormous heat and too much of water sometimes, you got an incredible erosion. So my advice would also be to not do the things and the mistakes that we have done in Europe and elsewhere, do more like the South Americans, and immediately go and see and work for conservational agriculture. You need to keep your soils covered, always, in order to protect it from the sun, to keep the water. Afterwards, only afterwards, comes all the issues of agronomical things. Fertilizers, water for sure. Fertilizers, there is apparently, according to the statistics, 5 to 6 times less fertilizer application in Africa. But fertilizer is not going to solve the issue if you don't take care of the ABC before. Mm-hmm. It's the same problem all over. People forget that if you put fertilizer in your soil and your pH is acidic, nothing is going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. Then they're going to say, oh, this fertilizer doesn't work. Well, sorry. You know, with acidic soils, what happens actually is that you kill all the little creatures in the soil which is going to make the nutrition available to your plants. And so you need to keep them alive. So you need to control your pH. So, I mean, this is an introduction. There's a hell of a lot of work to do. And so,
thank you so much, Philip. We'll come back to the ABC of farming later on. Ryan, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to just give the perspective of entrepreneurship and technology. So I'm the CEO of an agriculture technology startup. And as we look at the African continent, and of course not every country is the same, but some of sort of the general challenges for getting technologies into agriculture, similar to land ownership, comes down to things like IP ownership and challenges around, like if you're going to enter in the market with intellectual property, how do you protect that? And that's a risk for technology companies. And so this is a big risk because as you look at some of the developed countries and the way that we've been able to feed people, it's really been through technology advancement. And in addition to knowledge transfer and things like this, but if we're going to get really modern technologies into the market, it does come down to sort of risk and ownership as well. And so I think that's a big challenge that we need to tackle.
Thank you, Ryan. Dirk, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Dirk Leven. I'm the founder of Food Ventures. Maybe you're familiar with the greenhouses, but they originate from the Netherlands. For the last 100 years, we have developed methods on how to be more productive on such a small piece of the world, which actually was covered lately by National Geographic, called it "How this tiny world is feeding, how this tiny country is feeding the world." Well, through greenhouses, and that's what we do in different parts of the world, in China, in Central Eastern Europe, in Ukraine today. We believe that by using that technology, we can free up a lot of the land, the arable land, because what we are producing in 1 square meter, well, to name you an example, in Kazakhstan, where it's absolutely dry and close to a desert area, we are able to produce 80 kilograms of tomatoes in 1 square meter. By the traditional means, that would mean 100 times more land would be used if you keep using the traditional ways of producing that same vegetables. So we think that one of the technologies that are available and that are able to address these problems are bringing them indoors, so producing vegetables indoors, not having the issues with the soil, because we produce soilless. We basically lift it from the soil and we can produce it at any place. And by having it indoors, you protect your crop against all kinds of pesticides. So we're not using any chemicals, and we're using 5 times less fertilizers. And the fertilizers that we use are micromanaged, so super effective. So the question when I came in here was like, why are you not doing that in Africa? Well, unfortunately, the world is pretty big and everybody is asking for the same solutions. So as we speak, the US is developing their greenhouse industry at an enormous speed. Southeast Asia is trying to make sure that they can produce close to consumers. So in all different parts of the world, there are incentives to make this actually work. These kind of greenhouses, and that requires incentives on these investments to make. It's very capital intense. That requires regulations to support these kind of investments. It requires investments in the knowledge of people to run these facilities. So there's a whole ecosystem that needs to be developed in order to make that technology work.
That's correct. We'll come back to the transfer of technology later on, probably at the end of the session. But let me talk about the following question. Is it now easier to really overcome hunger in Africa, taking into consideration climate change, value chain? Now, climate change is a reality. I mean, it's, of course, as you know, Africa is the least CO2 producer or gas emission, but it is the most affected by climate change. A lot of flooding here and there, and then drought. I mean, a lot of countries are suffering from drought. Water is the top priority now in Africa. So So how do you think it's, so what do you think about this climate change and taking into consideration supply value chain? Would it be easier to end hunger, do you think, Professor John?
Thank you so much. What a great question. My gosh, it's so difficult to know what's going to happen with climate change. And Africa has been disproportionately affected by climate change. Everywhere else in the world that has developed very quickly is producing all those greenhouse gases, yet the effects are most serious in Africa. And it's really difficult to know what to do. A lot of folks notice that the rain comes more infrequently. That means it doesn't rain as often, but when it comes, it's like a flooding event. So the rain comes, but it doesn't come evenly. And so what we think we need in Africa is we need projects, big and small, to try to capture that water and to store it. One of the easiest ways to do so is to just reforest Africa, because trees actually capture a lot of water in their leaves and through a litter layer and a deep root system. So that is one possible solution, and it's something that I think is very well looked at in, for instance, the Great Green Wall. That's a wonderful initiative that's going on to try to push back the desert and to plant trees. And not just any type of tree, plant trees that are suitable for local communities, trees that bring income into the rural communities, trees that can be cut and the branches and leaves used as food for animals, trees that produce medicinal substances to be of help for the health of communities. So let me suggest to you that we have great opportunities ahead of us.
Philip, please, if you have comment on this.
Yes, Africa will be hit by a double whammy. As Joanne is explaining, it hits because of the rain and so on directly. But Africa, let's not forget, relies on import of grains, big time. And as we have seen this year, it's not that much available anymore as before. Last year I was at a conference and I predicted, which unfortunately came true, not the war, but the fact that fertilizer prices have gone through the roof already last year, and that applications in Europe dropped by 20%, which immediately, without even talking about the effect of the drought in Europe, had an effect on the availability of exportable wheat. Talk about 10 million tons. Then came Ukraine, which added another 15 million tons. And last year I said that the grain price was going to go up from $200 to $300. Well, now it's $350 and the dollar is 20% up. And this is just the beginning, because the worst is going to happen next year. Whatever wheat is coming out of Ukraine right now is going to be half next year. Why? Because the wheat now was planted before the war. The wheat which is now going to expected to be harvested is on at least 40% less surface. They have no fertilizers. They have virtually no fuel. So you can really cross down for a large part that part. So in Europe, it is actually the same. 70% of the fertilizer factories are down. 70% are down. Application rates are down by 30-40%. So the wheat which is going to be produced in these countries, which are supposed to supply to Africa, is going to be a lot less. And so I think that we really need to think about that. And I want to make some comments afterwards about that. But climate change is affecting Africa, but also Europe, America, everywhere. And that has an indirect effect even bigger on Africa.
Thank you so much, Philip. Ryan, please, do you have any comment on this climate change effect, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I just wanted to comment, like, related to climate change, and again, from the technology angle. So one of the things that we're working on as a company is this hot climate agriculture platform, really focused on, like, how do we grow food in areas that are hot and salt affected. So I can give you an example. Like, we're working on a tomato rootstock right now that we have tests from Egypt that we know in, like, the hottest and salty conditions in those fields, we can get over double the yield. And so looking ahead, and you were talking about, predicting what's coming, we know it's going to be hot again, and it's going to continue to be hot, and that's a challenge. And that's something that as a community, we need to develop technologies realizing that that's a fact.
Yeah, it is. Derek, please, if you have any comment on this?
Yeah, well, it's a disaster for sure. Like,
Yeah.
we can't make it nicer than that. But commenting on knowing that we have to deal with this situation, I totally agree. Like, I think we have to acknowledge that we need to feed half the population living in urban areas where it's extremely hot and humid. And we like to develop technologies that are able to produce close to that urban areas, which we haven't been doing for the last 100 years. The Dutch, for instance, don't know anything about hot and humid climates, so I wish we would. Yeah. But there's a world to win there, and I think we should not only look at it from the technology providers and hope for some kind of a magic stick. We should empower the growers. They can look very closely to when a plant is flourishing and why it's flourishing. So we had to find out ways how to produce nearby Shanghai, for instance, where the temperatures were 40 degrees, and you would say that a tomato plant with a humidity of 90% wouldn't flourish, and we managed by different ways of growings, and that was just the first year. So we really need to support the growing knowledge more and more.
Well, now there is, of course, a lot of research happening worldwide, including, of course, UM6P. We are giving a lot of importance on water and also on plants that are tolerant to different stresses, whether biotic or abiotic, like drought, etc., etc. Now, this brings me to the next question, which is the transfer, basically, of technology, information to vulnerable, populations, farmers. Mainly when it comes to so that you can reach really food security, nutrition security, and safety. And then, of course, when it comes also to agroecological, principles and design for natural resources management. So I would like just to add here, I'm an entomologist, so I work on insects. So this is the plant protection area. So we used to talk about food security in the past. Now we are talking about quality as well, which is nutritional quality, but we need to start adding safety. Unfortunately, in Africa, a lot of pesticides are used to control pests and diseases. There is use of biological control or integrated pest management approaches, but not that much in comparison to Europe, North America, etc. So we need to do a lot of education, campaigning, really capacity building in that regard, and also for the agroecological design. It's good you mentioned the Great Green Wall Initiative. Now UM6P with Senegalese institution, we are starting a model really. See, the Great Green Wall Initiative is 7,500 long. It's huge, from Mauritania all the way to Djibouti. It's very long. A lot of challenges. We are taking the Senegal as example. A lot of institutions are heavily involved. They have an agency with 7,000 workers really working on this. But the key, as you mentioned, Juan, is to get the communities, local communities involved in designing the agroecological system. What trees, what plants to plant, what feed for animals, etc. You have to look at the holistic approach. Anyhow, Juan, please.
Thank you again. We're really excited about the Great Green Wall Initiative because it seems to us it's the most effective way that we can sort of push back the desert and retake the land that can be productive and support those local communities. But there are many, many technologies that are now available that could be extraordinarily interesting in Africa. There's a lot of agricultural microbials. We heard just now about biocontrol agents. There's fertilizers to meet the micronutrient demands of folks in their nutrition and their diet. How do we get them out to communities? How do we convince people that there would be appropriate, that they should invest in it or they should try it? So it's a bit challenging, it's a bit difficult, but we think that there's opportunities, maybe even investment opportunities to support organizations that would be like a clearinghouse for information. people could text a question in, what's an agricultural microbial, and get some information back that they could understand. Maybe local communities can be partners in buying large amounts of fertilizer and then distributing it into smaller packets for all the people in their community. Same sort of thing with agricultural microbials, small cooperatives, small groups. It may be that there's a combination of large initiatives and small community-based initiatives that will tackle this knowledge translation and knowledge sharing problem from two ends, from the small scale level and from the large commercialization level. But let me pass it over to a colleague that knows more about those business aspects.
Please, Phyllis. Thank you.
I'm not sure I know more. Have another perspective. Actually, there's very fascinating startups in Eastern Africa, especially in Kenya and Tanzania. One of them is called We Farm. It's not like we work or we fail, but it's called We Farm. It's actually relying on the farmers itself, and they communicate by SMS because internet is not always available. Yeah. And actually, it's starting, and it gets quite a lot of, I'm talking about tens of thousands of new people participating in that. It's a person sitting somewhere saying, I got my tomato and I see this, somebody can help me. Send it by SMS, and then somebody else will say, I got the same, do that. Education is the key. Because, when we were very young, I thought I was going to be a farmer, and it's very simple. You put some seed in the soil, it grows, and that's it. But actually, it's very complicated, and everything is there. First, to eat the seed, and then take the water from the seed, and then eat the plants, and so on. There's a lot of know-how, and you cannot expect the small farmers in rural Africa to know all that. But they have to start relying on all the know-how which is available in the community. It's not, you don't have to reinvent the wheel anymore. It is there. And this communication and this network can help them in many other ways. Fertilizers are not very much applied. I'm talking about 1/8 to 1/10 in certain areas compared to the normal norms. But the reason is also that they are way too expensive. They're way too expensive. 30 to 40% markup by the distributor. Excuse me. In Europe, is 2 to 3%. And of course, then please don't apply fertilizer because you're going to go bankrupt. It's not possible. So the communications can take out the middleman or make them more honest. And there are thousands and thousands of things like that. For instance, also, it's all a matter of being your neighbor is not your competitor. You only compete for land and water. But as I started, make the land very well defined, and then you don't compete anymore for the lands. But the problem is then, when you do all that, the competition is, for instance, rice. The competition is in India. The competition is in Vietnam, in Thailand. All these guys are ready to export. And they produce it way more efficient than in Africa. And then if you even get it well in the farm itself, it still has to go to the crusher. And what we have seen also in Nigeria and especially in Tanzania is that the crushing companies, because they are protected by the state and probably also corrupted, they get huge protection and they have no incentive at all to get efficient. So even if you're efficient on the rice itself, it has to go to the crusher, to go to the customer, but the crusher takes everything. So there's a lot of stuff to do, a lot. But communication is the key to bring it all open.
Excellent. Ryan, anything to add on this communication, transfer of technology aspect?
I think the only thing I was going to add, and it was related to, I think the original question was around food security. Yeah. And when we talk about food security, there's really two angles. There's sort of food security from a calorie perspective, and then also from a nutrition perspective. And the nutrition perspective is really important and more important. And I guess that's where, with controlled environment agriculture, having the opportunity to grow fresh fruit and vegetables close to large populations gives an opportunity. But that's something that takes knowledge transfer, certainly. It takes training, and it takes that technology transfer as well.
Exactly. A lot of capacity building, I would say. Derek, anything to add?
Yeah, when we're talking about food safety, the criteria is always would you feed what you produce to your kids, I guess. So that's at least what we try to take as a criteria. And one of the things that we all don't like, of course, are all the chemicals being used. The beauty of trying to grow it biological in a contained environment is that once you introduce, so basically the idea is you introduce biological protection against the bad insects instead of using chemicals. The moment you introduce them, you have to invest heavily in that population of insects that you introduce, and you want to maintain that population. So the moment you spray with chemicals, you kill basically your biological protection, and your investment in biological production is gone. So it's a very delicate balance. The problem that we see in the countries that we work in is that chemicals are so cheap that every producer, also my neighbor, chooses chemicals. I mean, we have to invest 50,000 euros in a 5-hectare facility, whereas my neighbors are using for 10,000 euros of chemicals and can spray it 3 times in a week. Does the consumer know it? No. Are they willing to pay for it? No way. So it's just me picking the bill for 40,000 euros because in the end we believe that the consumer wants it. But how do we convince the consumer to buy the right stuff, and how do we spread that message while still making sure that it's an affordable product? That's one of the big challenges, I guess, that we're having especially in new markets.
Excellent, Dirk. I liked your statement, whether you will give your children what you produce, whether you feed your children what you produce from your farm. If you are not sure,
And do something else.
Yeah, that's a good. I like that statement. Now there is this concept of One Health. One Health, basically is built on the principle of plant health, soil health, human health, animal health, environmental health. Okay, and it has been adopted by UN, of course, as a concept. So what would you say? Do you think would One Health be a sustainable approach to increase and sustain food production, nutritional, of course, produce nutritional food for the African people? Juan, please.
I think it is the only approach. I think we have to use the One Health approach. Let me tell you why. Let's take the issue of water again. So suppose that we need to irrigate crops and there's water around. Should any old water be used to irrigate that crop? Maybe not. Maybe we should test it. If there are pathogens in the water, they will be transmitted up the food chain. They'll go from the soil into the plant because they tend to get associated with the plant. They absorb even into plants. And then they will transmit to the livestock and to the people. Same with chemicals. So if there's toxic chemicals in the water, it will go up through the food chain. And there's even emerging contaminants. So there are cyanotoxins that come from harmful algal blooms. And we're learning about how they transmit through the food chain, and they're very dangerous. They can kill animals, they can kill people, or cause chronic health effects. So we have to be extraordinarily sensitive to the fact that everything in the whole environment is connected. And to keep healthy populations means that we need to take care of all the health of the water, the health of the soil, the health of the land, the crops, the animals, and finally, we'll have healthy people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juan. Philip, please.
We all want to have the healthiest food possible. The problem is there enough? And we have this thing in Europe, farm to fork, where Europe is saying 20% less fertilizer, which is an easy one because we're already down by 30, 40. Less pesticide, definitely 50 or 25%, and we should be 50% organic. Who is going to buy 50% organic? It's too expensive. And I'm starting by saying this, that Africa is not at the bottom. I mean, there are farms which are absolutely top-notch there. Have no illusions. There are some farms which are top-notch. The question is to lift up everybody else. And there is a couple of things that you need to know what's going to happen, because we saw it in Bulgaria, in Romania, and so on. As the farmers are getting, especially now I'm talking about the wheat farmers, the rice farmers, I'm talking about the big commodity things. I'm not talking about the tomatoes and the cucumbers and so on. That is really another animal. They're going to get a lot more efficient. But agriculture, for instance, in Bulgaria has killed 700,000 jobs by getting more efficient in less than 15 years. And so it's not just about you're going to increase productivity. You're going to kill a lot of jobs if that all happens. And it's going to happen. And the question is that, how long it's going to take. Of course, it's not going to take one generation. It's going to take, according to me, 2 generations. Africa has too many problems, but you have to start somewhere. I'm not saying that the start has not started. It has started. But in order to say that we want to have clean food, is like saying that we want to have green energy. We all want to have zero carbon energy, but in order to get there, we need to keep hot. We need to have our energy going. So it's going to take a while. And of course, we are against pesticides and overuses. But I really believe more in communication so that people, even if it's only $1, if they can avoid to spend $1, they will do so, but just by being informed.
Thank you, Philip. Ryan? Okay, Dick?
Yeah, this is difficult because I indeed notice like the open field production is completely different question than what we are doing in the vegetables. So I won't mention the name or the technology greenhouses anymore. Yeah. But I hope at least that Africa is not making the same mistake that we have made in the Netherlands, where under the push of banks and politicians, we have been only commercializing and scaling up. That was the magic word, right? Every farmer had to scale, had to get bigger in order to survive. And we end up with farmers that still earn the same or even less than 20 years ago, despite that they're 20 times bigger. We end up with a soil which is completely dead because we have used so much fertilizers and so much pesticides to keep it sort of like suitable for arable land, that we lost a big part of nature. And that's the kind of transition that we in the Netherlands are now looking at. Like how do we get back again, like from this large scale farming back to an alternative like regenerative farming, which is very promising. I mean, the examples are there of a dead land of the neighbor by the big tractors and by all the fertilizers and pesticides, and a regenerative farm next to it that after 3 to 5 years, by crop changes and by avoiding heavy machinery and by handworks, again revitalizes the soil as such that it delivers not only biological food, but also creates a great income for those working at it. So I hope that's my only wish, that we do not make the same mistake in Africa as we've done in the Netherlands. So to that topic of green energy, why shouldn't we jump immediately to green energy if we have the opportunities? I mean, there are technologies available now, and we do have a better knowledge and wisdom than we had decades ago.
So we have about 6 minutes or so, but let me just quick comment. I strongly believe that we cannot feed the world with organic farming. I'm a strong believer in that, Philip. But what I believe is that we should provide safe food to people. Use pesticide, do whatever you like, but make sure you respect the harvest time, you respect the dose, you respect. That's what we are saying, because you cannot feed the world with organic. But the consumer needs to have a choice, organic, regular food, but that regular stuff should be safe. That's all I think what really pushing for. Last question, with the IT revolution, the West basically has benefited. You see a lot of, you communicate with farmers quickly, the farmers adopt quickly, and this has implication on, the wealth of farmers, people, sanitation, environment, etc. But unfortunately, in Africa, we have not seen that. We still see the gap between have and have not still big. So what's happening? What should we do, Juan? Philip, we start with you first. That's good.
What should we do? I think, first of all, the government spending on agriculture in Africa is way too low. And whatever they spend, it doesn't trickle down to the people who are in the outback, in the little farms. It gets lost. Let's say the system is corrupted. Rather support somebody who got an exclusivity, who is protected by tariffs, and then say he buys some stuff from the farm and going and do the hard work and make sure that the farmer there can put his little pump, get the water, get a little education, make sure that in the schools already, that's very important, in the schools already, the little children, 6, 7, 8 years old, they should not just be given the lesson from put the seed in the thing and it's going to grow. I mean, children are way more intelligent than that, you know. And so it starts there. But first of all, funding should be reorganized by the governments themselves. They have to read that. Like, too many, I mean, there's a crazy the amount of people who rely on local farms in Africa. And so if 30-40% of your population is there, spend the bulk of the money there. It's going to have the biggest effects.
Excellent point, Philip. Prime. Okay, Dirk.
No, I'm really positive of the whole idea of information sharing. I think it's great to see how farms in different kind of the worlds call themselves internet farming or Google. Lately we were in a farm on an island and they called themselves Google farmers. What they basically did is they had a problem, they Googled it and they solved it. That's wonderful, right? I mean, the way we spread our knowledge now from centrated areas in the world all over is promising for Africa as well. I'm pretty sure. And the era of just SMSs in Africa are way over. I mean, it's everybody's getting access to internet. Everybody's getting access to great know-how. So I'm quite positive on that.
But do you think it should happen in Africa? I mean, I'm talking about Africa that should benefit really from the IT revolution, so that the information is really...
I think they will. Yeah, I think they will, yeah.
Juan.
Thanks so much. Do I get the last comment?
Yes, well, yeah.
So, I think we have a young generation in Africa that's very savvy about the internet, and I think there's ways to get messages out to them. And let me just be very funny about how this message can get out. What about TikTok? All the young people seem to love it. So I think there are very creative ways that we can get messages out, that we can share information, and that we can solicit input from people, because with these type of platforms that allow sharing in both directions, to watch, but also to contribute, I think we have some opportunities ahead. All we need to do, perhaps, is set up channels or ways to help people communicate what they know and share. So that's my closing comment. Thank you.
Okay, well, so let me now, well, we have only 4 minutes left, so we'll probably give you 30 seconds, 1 minute each. But really for conclude the remarks, and then are we optimistic about the food, nutritional security and safety in Africa? That's, you know, what last thing to...
I think we are human beings. We have to be optimistic. We have to always hope. What can we concretely do? I think that the folks that have knowledge would really like to share it. And I'm looking to organizations that work in a way that they act to create partnerships. I believe that's a very important role that an institution like UM6P can offer, because I know that they are very well connected with a lot of organizations. So I'm optimistic in the sense that I believe there's a lot of energy and a lot of goodwill to try to spearhead and support initiatives that will lead to a lot more sharing. And it will come from a higher level, but it will trickle down to grassroots. It will also come from the grassroots, and it will come back up to reorient programming. I think that's how it's going to go. That's my vision anyways.
Thank you, Philip.
I have to give the gold shower. I'm not optimistic because the governments will not do anything to get the primary thing done. It means making sure that people know which land is theirs. So that is one thing that's going to take 5 to 10 years. Second, there's a huge extra crisis coming next year. You have no idea what's going to happen. The war of Ukraine is going to continue. There's a lot less wheat going to become available. If the climate is the same as this year, it's going to be a drama. A drama. As much as I said that it's going to go last year from $200 to $300, it's already $350. It may be going way over $400. Egypt is importing 11 million tons. 11 million tons of wheat. Algeria, 4. Morocco, 4. Kingdom, 5. That's a lot of billions more if you have to pay $100 more. Huh? So there is some adjustments to be done. I think that maybe you should think about, that's going to get too far. But I'm saying that I'm not optimistic. The governments really have to start thinking very well how I'm going to secure at reasonable prices the wheat which I will need to have.
Ryan, please conclude the remark.
Yeah, so I'm going to share a mixed response. I think I think things are going to be very hard in the short term. So I absolutely agree with what Philip is saying. But I'm optimistic about the long term. So maybe I'm sort of agreeing with you both. I think even talking about like Google farmers, like the access to information and really the age of entrepreneurship and the opportunity for entrepreneurs within Africa to start creating businesses and solving some of their own problems, in addition to, because things are going to be so hard in the short term, it's going to really make those problems acute that people are going to start really taking them seriously and trying to address them. So I'm optimistic about, let's say, the midterm, but I agree with you in the short term, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be hot. There's going to be a shortage of food. It's going to be hard.
Thank you so much. Dirk, last
Yes,
conclude remark.
I'm optimistic. I mean, we're, as we speak, producing lettuce in Ukraine at a time of war, and we're doing so profitably and selling it locally in Ukraine. I mean, we have the means, we have the technology, we have the know-how of people to build a resilient food system close to where it's produced, even in times of war. So why not any place else in the world, including Africa?
Excellent, Dirk. So I'm personally very optimistic. Not only optimistic, but very optimistic. And but with the condition, one condition, that government needs to invest, need to multiply by, I would say, 10 times their investment on research and education. I will not say agriculture, but in general, education and research. Unfortunately, in Africa, the investment is still, less probably than 1% of their GDP. That's low. So very optimistic. I'm sure universities like UM6P, Mohamed VI Polytechnic University, a lot of, involvement in Africa with a lot of partners. I'm sure we put hands together. I'm sure we can make Africa rich food and nutrition security and safety. And thank you so much. Let's give them a big applause.